Hello, and welcome. You have found a quiet place, a moment in time to settle in, to let go of the day. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be, except right here. Allow your body to grow heavy, your muscles to soften. Feel the surface beneath you, supporting you completely. Now, let your mind begin to drift. We are going on a journey, not one of excitement, but of quiet contemplation. We are traveling back, far, far back, across the sands of time. Imagine a ribbon of deep blue water cutting through an endless expanse of gold. This is the Nile, the lifeblood of a civilization, and on its banks, a kingdom is rising. We are traveling 4,500 years into the past, to the old kingdom of Egypt, the fourth dynasty. It is a time so distant, it is almost mythical. A time when the world was younger, and the line between the gods and humankind was impossibly thin. Tonight, we are going to the Giza Plateau, not as it is today, a monument visited by millions, but as it was, a living, breathing, sprawling construction site. A project of a scale the world had never seen. We are here to understand the hidden truth of the Great Pyramid. A story not of aliens or lost technologies, but of human will, of meticulous organization, and of a belief that stretched beyond life itself. We will explore the life of the laborer who built it, the genius who designed its precursor, the mystery of its construction, and the divine world of the king for whom it was built. There is no need to focus, there is no need to remember, just listen. Let the details of this ancient world, this black land of Kemet, wash over you. Let the sound of my voice be a guide, as you drift and you relax. Imagine yourself waking before the sun. The air in the pre-dawn light is cool, almost cold. A sharp contrast to the day that awaits. You are in a small, mud-brick house, in a sprawling, densely packed city. This is not a collection of slave huts. Let us be clear on that. The evidence for slavery in building the pyramids is scant, if it exists at all. No, you are a conscripted laborer, a skilled artisan, perhaps, or a farmer. Your fields, your home, they are somewhere along the Nile. But for 3 or 4 months of the year, during the Akit, the season of the inundation, your fields are underwater. And so, you are here. The state has called upon you, and tens of thousands like you, to build a monument for your king, your god-king. This sprawling city of laborers, a place we now call Height El Garab, is a marvel of organization. It is not the famous village of Deir el Medina, that community of artists who will build the tombs in the Valley of the Kings will not exist for another 1,000 years. No, this is a purpose-built industrial town. You rise from your sleeping mat. The room is simple. The walls are rough. You share this space with several other men. You can hear the city stirring around you. The low murmur of voices, the smell of baking bread from the massive state-run bakeries down the street. You dress simply, a linen kilt, that is all. You are barefoot. You make your way through the narrow, planned streets to one of the great communal halls. Here, your payment is distributed, not in coin. Money, as we know it, does not yet exist. Your payment is food, your sustenance. You are handed several loaves of coarse, nutritious emmer wheat bread, and a large jar of thick, protein-rich beer. This is not the light, clear beverage we know today. This beer is a staple, more of a soupy, fermented gruel. The fuel that will power the entire Giza Plateau. You eat quickly. The sun is now beginning to touch the horizon, and the great shadow of the pyramid, your life's work, looms to the west. Now, the day's labor begins. You are part of a team, a phyle, with its own name, its own identity. Perhaps you are the friends of Khufu, or the drunkards of Menkaure. These names, found in inscriptions, give us a human glimpse into the massive, anonymous workforce. Your task today is at the quarry. You walk with your team, perhaps thousands of you, moving in organized gangs. The limestone quarries for the pyramid's core blocks are right here on the Giza Plateau. The air fills with a rhythmic, percussive sound. Thud, thud. It is the sound of hard, black dolerite pounders, stone against stone, as teams of quarrymen strike the limestone, freeing the massive 2.5-ton blocks. Other teams use copper chisels. The copper is soft, it blunts quickly, and must be constantly resharpened by teams of smiths working at forges nearby. It is dusty work. The fine, white limestone powder gets into everything. Into your mouth, your nose, your lungs. And the sun is rising. The Egyptian sun, it is relentless, reflecting brightly off the white stone. Pause for seconds once a block is free. The next great challenge begins. Transport. The block is levered onto a massive wooden sledge. Thick ropes are tied around it. Your team, perhaps 20 men, takes up the ropes. And you pull in unison. A foreman chants a rhythm, a call and response to keep your movements aligned. Heave and pull, heave and pull. The sledge moves over the ground, but the friction is immense, and so another man walks just in front of the sledge. He holds a small jar, and he pours a thin stream of water onto the sand, just in the sledge's path. This simple act, this precise amount of water, hardens the sand, drastically reducing the friction. The block slides, just a little more easily, but the weight is still immense. Your muscles burn, your back aches. This is a rhythm you will follow for hours. And then, there is the ramp, a massive, sloping structure of packed earth, limestone chips, and wooden beams. It snakes its way up the side of the growing pyramid. It is, in its own way, as massive an engineering project as the pyramid itself. And you must pull the block up. This is the endless climb, the most grueling part of the day. Step after step, the incline is gentle but relentless. You lean into the rope, your feet finding purchase on the packed earth. The block behind you is a 2.5-ton monster, a single piece of a giant's puzzle. The work is not without its cost. This is, perhaps, the most dangerous part of the job. The site is a place of immense, unforgiving weight. A slipped rope, a splintering wooden sledge, a moment of lost footing, a moment's inattention could lead to a catastrophic injury. A life changed in an instant by the unforgiving stone. Archaeologists have found the evidence. In the nearby workers' cemetery, they have found skeletons with healed fractures, bones set with skill. They have found evidence of amputations. Where the patient survived the procedure, there was a medical system in place. Surgeons, physicians, you were cared for. You were not disposable. You were a skilled, valuable asset to the Egyptian state, a participant in a sacred project. But why do it? It was not just the conscription, it was the concept of cosmic order, of balance, of the rightness of things. The pharaoh was the guarantor of Ma'at, by building his eternal home, his stairway to the stars. You were playing your part in upholding the very order of the universe. You were building eternity. As the sun finally begins to dip, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the long day ends. You return to your village. The weariness is bone deep. You collect your rations. More bread, more beer, perhaps some dried fish or vegetables. You eat with your team. You tend to your aches, your blistered hands, and then you sleep. You sleep deeply, exhaustedly, because tomorrow, before the sun rises, you will wake, and you will do it all again. This is the rhythm of your life. On the Giza Plateau, the steady, arduous, human effort that built a wonder. Imagine yourself waking before the sun. The air in the pre-dawn light is cool, almost cold, a sharp contrast to the heat that is already being promised by the clear, deep purple Egyptian sky. You are in a simple, standardized, mud brick barrack block, part of a massive, temporary city built entirely for the purpose of monumental construction. This sprawling settlement, known to archaeologists today as Hait El Garab, or the Lost City of the Pyramid Builders, is a marvel of ancient logistics. It is not a haphazard camp. It is an organized, purpose-built, industrial hub, housing perhaps 20,000 people. You are here not because you were captured, but because you were called. Your fields, your home. They are somewhere along the fertile banks of the Nile. But for 3 or 4 months of the year, during the Akit, the season when the great river floods and covers the farmland, your service is required by the state. This is conscripted labor, a form of taxation, a duty, and a massive national undertaking. You rise from your sleeping mat. The room is Spartan. Rough stone and dried mud, shared with up to 20 men in your filey or gang. You can hear the city stirring round you. The low murmur of tired voices, the rustle of straw bedding, and the pervasive, comforting smell of baking bread from the massive state-run bakeries nearby. You dress simply. A coarse linen kilt belted at the waist. You are barefoot. The fuel of the pyramid, you make your way through the narrow, planned streets toward the communal halls. Here, your compensation, your very sustenance is distributed. This system is the engine of the entire project. You are handed several loaves of emmer wheat bread. It is coarse, heavy, and immensely nutritious. And you receive a generous daily ration of beer. This beverage is thick, cloudy, and low in alcohol content, more of a nutritious gruel than a modern drink. Rich in vitamins and calories necessary for the grueling day ahead. Archaeological excavations of the city have uncovered massive breweries and bakeries, demonstrating the industrial scale required to feed this army of laborers. We know, through the sheer volume of bones discovered, that the workers were also well fed, receiving regular meat rations of beef, goat, and fish. You eat quickly. The sun is now beginning to touch the horizon, and a great shadow of the pyramid, your purpose, looms to the west. Your spirit is quiet, centered on Matha cosmic order, the sense of rightness and balance that the Pharaoh exists to uphold. By building his eternal home, you are performing a profound religious duty. The walk to the quarry, you join your team, perhaps one of the friends of Khufu or the mighty crew, names often found painted on the blocks themselves, marking the organization's pride. Your task today is at the quarry. You walk in a long, dusty procession toward the limestone ridge of Giza, where the massive core blocks are harvested. The air quickly fills with a loud, rhythmic sound. It is a deafening, continuous thud, thud, thud. The sound of specialized teams using dolerite pounders' heart, black stones, to beat the softer limestone, marking out the lines for the next block to be freed from the bedrock. Other teams use copper chisels. Copper is soft, easily blunted, and must be constantly pulled from the line and sent to the nearby smiths for resharpening. This constant cycle of dulling, sharpening, and pounding creates the pervasive, mechanical soundtrack of the plateau. The fine, white limestone dust is everywhere, coating your clothes, settling on your skin, catching the early morning light. Hauling the stone, once a block is cut free and shaped roughly. The next challenge begins: transport. The immense block is carefully wedged and levered onto a massive, heavy wooden sledge. The sledge is made of rough cedar or acacia, built for durability, not speed. Thick ropes, woven from flax or papyrus, are secured round the stone. Your filey takes up the ropes. 20 men, perhaps 30, distributed evenly. And you pull in unison. The foreman walks alongside the sledge, chanting the rhythm, his voice cutting through the noise. Heave and pull, heave and pull. The friction between the wooden runners and the sand is immense. This is where the simple genius of the Egyptian logistics comes into play. Another man walks just in front of the sledge. He holds a large water jar, and he pours a thin, precise stream of Nile water onto the path ahead. The water dampens the sand just enough to harden it slightly, drastically reducing friction, allowing the sledge to glide forward. This small detail, confirmed by a famous wall painting from later tombs, tells us volumes about the organized efficiency of the operation. The ascent, labor and risk. Your journey continues to the ramp. The massive, sloping structure of packed earth, rubble, and timber is constantly being built, extended, and reinforced. It is the artery of the entire project. You reach the foot of the ramp, and the real strain begins. The slope is gentle, perhaps $8 circ dollar, but it is relentless. You lean forward into the rope, feet finding purchase on the rough, packed surface. The ascent is long, slow, and measured. It may take the better part of the morning to haul a single block from the quarry to its final resting place several hundred feet above. This entire environment is one of immense, unforgiving weight. The work is not without its significant cost. A small slip, a rotten beam, a miscommunication in the team's chant, and a 2.5-ton block could shift. The danger of catastrophic injury is ever present. A slipped rope could mean a falling block. A splintered sledge could mean a devastating accident. Archaeologists studying the nearby workers' cemeteries have found powerful evidence of this struggle. Skeletons with carefully set and healed fractures, indications of successful surgical amputations, and signs of sophisticated medical care. You were not viewed as disposable. Your life, your skill, and your recovery were vital assets to the state. The physicians here were respected and highly trained. As the sun climbs higher, the heat becomes oppressive. The noise of the thousands of men and the rhythmic hammering blends into a continuous, deafening hum. It is a symphony of pure, coordinated, human effort. Finally, the block reaches its destination level. It is carefully levered off the sledge, and using simple wedges and levers, nudged into its precise, final resting place. The precision is astonishing, a testament to the unseen planners and engineers. The long day ends as the sun begins to set. The signal is given. The tools are carefully placed down, and you make your way back down the dusty ramp, exhausted, bone-weary, but fed. You performed your duty. You upheld Marat. You return to the quiet of the workers' village, eat your coarse but sustaining meal, and fall into a deep, immediate sleep, preparing for the inevitable rhythm of the next day. This rhythm, this process, this quiet devotion to a single task, is the true engine of the pyramid. We leave the heat and dust of 4th Dynasty Giza and travel back in time. Just a little further, to the quieter, more experimental period of the 3rd Dynasty. Our destination is the vast necropolis of Saqqara, a landscape dominated not by a smooth monument, but by a structure built in colossal steps. Here, we must find a man. He was not a king. He was not born of divine blood. His name was Imhotep, and he was, in all likelihood, the first recorded genius in the world, a true polymath, whose singular vision set the course for monumental architecture in Egypt. The multifaceted sage, Imhotep was the vizier to his king, the pharaoh Djoser, making him the highest official in the entire land, second only to the god-king himself. But his titles stretched far beyond politics: chief architect and chief sculptor, high priest of Heliopolis, the sacred center of the sun god Ra, chief of the king's works, and perhaps most enduringly, physician. Before Imhotep, the tombs of pharaohs, as we noted, were large, rectangular structures made of sun-dried mud brick, known as mastabas. They were grand, but they were fragile. Imhotep recognized that eternity required a material that itself was eternal. His revolutionary idea was not just to build a grander tomb, but to build with stone. The step pyramid, a vision in stone. Djoser's project began simply enough: a large, square mastaba of precisely cut limestone blocks. This was already a monumental innovation. But Imhotep's vision grew during the construction. He expanded the square mastaba to a rectangle, and then he built a smaller, second mastaba directly on top of the first, and a third, and a fourth, until he had constructed a massive six-tiered structure rising over 200 feet high. This was the step pyramid. It was a massive, physical, stone representation of the king's journey to the afterlife, a colossal, permanent stairway to the stars. It was a geological monument that physically mirrored the mythical ascent of the pharaoh's soul. The complex of eternity. Imhotep's genius didn't end with the pyramid itself. He designed the entire complex, surrounding the pyramid with a vast, ceremonial walled enclosure stretching over 37 acres. The entire precinct was a mirror of Djoser's palace and his kingdom, designed to allow the king's spirit, his Ka, to continue performing the vital rituals of kingship after his death. The walls of this enclosure were not flat, but decorated with intricate, recessed paneling, built to look exactly like the woven matting of the actual palace walls, a magnificent illusion carved in permanent stone. Within this complex, Imhotep created the said festival courtyard, a vast ceremonial space lined with symbolic chapels. The said festival was a jubilee ritual performed by the king to renew his vitality and reaffirm his right to rule. Imhotep built the entire site in stone, so Djoser's spirit could perform this ritual for eternity. The Sardob, a sealed stone chamber containing the life-sized statue of Djoser. This statue, known as the Ka statue, was placed so its eyes could look out through two small peepholes, gazing north toward the stars, the destination of the royal soul. This entire complex was built with millions of small, manageable stone blocks, designed to mimic mud brick. It was a masterpiece of organizational and artistic transition, moving Egypt from the temporary earth to the permanent stone. The healing legacy beyond the stone. Imhotep was revered as a great physician. While we have no texts directly from his hand, his name became intrinsically linked to ancient Egyptian medicine. His medical philosophy, reflected in later texts like the Edwin Smith Papyrus, showed a profound degree of rationality. The papyrus details diagnoses, prognoses, and treatments for various injuries, often relying on observation, setting bones, and wound dressing, rather than solely on magical incantations. This blend of empirical observation and spiritual belief speaks volumes about the early, sophisticated intellectual environment fostered by men like Imhotep. Deification and worship. Imhotep's greatest achievement, however, was his own longevity in the Egyptian mind. Over the centuries, his reputation grew from a wise man to a demigod. By the New Kingdom, scribes performing their craft would ritually pour a single drop of water from their palates, a small offering in his honor, recognizing him as the patron of all wisdom and literature. By the late period, over 1,400 years after his death, the impossible happened. This common-born architect was fully deified. He was worshipped as Imhotep, the god of medicine, wisdom, and architecture, often alongside the goddess Sekhmet. the patron of healing. Temples were built in his honor across Egypt, where pilgrims would sleep, hoping for healing dreams sent by the god himself. The Greeks, arriving much later, fully accepted his divinity, equating him with their own god of healing, as Imhotep's story is the story of human potential. He was the man who taught an entire civilization how to build a mountain, not for himself, but for his king, securing the cosmic order, and achieving a personal immortality that dwarfed that of many pharaohs. We now return our focus to the Great Pyramid of Khufu at Giza. Having understood the human labor and the architectural precedents, we must now confront the central engineering problem that has baffled humanity for millennia: the ascent. The scale demands attention. $2.30 million blocks, an average weight of $2.50 tons, a vertical rise of $481 feet, a project that required the perfect, precise placement of these stones without the benefit of the wheel or the pulley. The true wonder lies not in a secret alien power, but in the ingenious, organized application of simple physics. And the answer, increasingly, points to the sophisticated, hidden system of ramps. Debunking the single external ramp for decades, the dominant theory was a single, long, straight external ramp, running from the desert floor directly up one face of the pyramid. However, detailed modeling showed this was practically impossible. To maintain a safe, usable slope, one that would not cause a 2-ton block to slide back down, or one that men could actually drag the stone up the ramp's length, would have to be enormous. A ramp built to the top would have to be over a mile long and would have contained more material, more sheer volume, than the pyramid itself. Furthermore, it would have required constant, dangerous shoring and shoring up of the corners, and no archaeological trace of a structure of that immense size remains. This problem demands a solution that is both simpler and more complex. The internal ramp theory. The most compelling modern solution is the internal ramp theory, detailed by architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, who has dedicated decades to this puzzle. This theory suggests that the construction was a highly efficient, two-pronged approach. The lower external ramp, a single, wide, low external ramp, was indeed used, but only for the first third of the pyramid's height, around 150 feet. This ramp was essential for hauling the heavy, massive $50 to 80-ton granite beams that roofed the king's chamber, and relieving chambers, as these are located low in the structure. Once these heaviest blocks were in place, the lower ramp was dismantled. The hidden internal ramp. Simultaneously, a corkscrew ramp was built inside the pyramid. Imagine a tunneler-wide, gently sloping corridor, embedded just beneath the outer face of the pyramid. This corridor spirals upward, turning at each of the four corners, creating a continuous, sheltered roadway that spirals all the way to the top of the pyramid. The advantages are profound. Stability. The ramp is contained and supported by the enormous mass of the pyramid itself, eliminating the need for complex, external shoring. Efficiency. Work could continue year-round, shielded from the worst of the desert sun. Logistics of turning. The theory suggests that at each corner of the spiral, the ramp would temporarily break through the corner of the pyramid, creating a small notch or open platform. This platform was essential. It allowed the teams to pause, reposition the enormous blocks using simple levers and rotation devices, and turn the corner before beginning the ascent on the next face. This subtle detail explains an otherwise inexplicable structural void visible on one of the pyramid's corners. This theory gained credence when a 1986 French team performed a microgravimetric survey of the pyramid. which indicated the presence of a lower density, spiral-shaped structure beneath the outer stone, precisely where this hidden ramp would be. The Grand Gallery machine, the mystery of construction, also extends to the magnificent internal structures, particularly the Grand Gallery. This soaring, 153-foot long hallway, with its high, stepped, corbelled roof, is an architectural masterpiece. Yet, it is vastly over-engineered to be a simple corridor. It is likely that the Grand Gallery was not a hallway at all, but a machine. A place to generate immense power for the final, most crucial heavy lift. Temporary system used to haul the incredibly heavy $25 to $50-ton granite ceiling blocks up and into place over the king's chamber. The true marvel of the pyramid is that the structure itself contained the tools necessary for its own construction. The genius was in the elegant simplicity of the logistics. The mystery isn't one of magic, but of the most detailed, patient, and sophisticated management the ancient world had ever known. And the ceremonial crowns, the white crown, the red crown, is a sacred ceremony, transforming the man into the god. He is, throughout his entire day, the guarantor of Maat. Every breath he takes, every action he performs, is a cosmic event. He must perform the rituals necessary to ensure the sun will rise. The Nile will flood, and the enemies of Egypt will remain at bay. The court and protocol, the royal court, operating around the pharaoh, was governed by a suffocating level of protocol. To enter the presence of Khufu was to enter the presence of a deity. The palace was meticulously organized, run by thousands of specialized court officials, each with an exact title and duty: the vizier, the highest official, the overseer of the royal treasury, the master of the royal horse. The silence in the throne room was profound. No one could speak directly to the pharaoh. All requests and communications were routed through the vizier. Furthermore, no courtier was permitted to look the pharaoh directly in the eye. Visitors, especially foreigners, would often be required to enter the throne room in full prostration, shentet, crawling on the ground to show ultimate respect, never meeting the gaze of the living god. The wealth surrounding him was absolute, but its function was spiritual. His food, his furniture, and his personal items were all the finest the kingdom could produce, suitable for a god. Yet, this material opulence was overshadowed by the spiritual confinement. He was always on, always performing the ritual necessary to keep the kingdom stable. Preparation for the Horizon Akhet Khufu's entire reign was, in essence, a $20-year preparation for his death. The pyramid, the Akhet Khufu, the Horizon of Khufu, was his ultimate machine for resurrection. It was not a sad tomb, but an eternal springboard for his soul. The meticulous work surrounding his pyramid reflected this ultimate goal. The solar barks, massive, full-sized cedar boats, some over 140 feet long, were buried in sealed pits around the pyramid. These solar barks were intended to carry Khufu's bar, his soul's mobility, as it traveled with the sun god Ra across the heavens, a journey essential for him to fulfill his divine function in the afterlife. The king's chamber, located deep within the stone. This chamber was built to house the large, red granite sarcophagus that would contain his mummy. while Khufu's pyramid was not inscribed internally. The essence of these texts was the magical knowledge necessary for the king to navigate the underworld. These were the spells, the instructions, and the incantations needed for his Ka spirit double to unite with his Ba soul, merge with the gods, and achieve true immortality. The king was buried with his entire ritual life, the food, the furniture, the spells, so he could live eternally in the same divine station he held in life. Khufu was the anchor of the kingdom. His life was the ritual, his death was the transition, and his pyramid was the guaranteed celestial trajectory for his soul. Before we move northward into the quiet expanse of the Arctic, take one more slow breath and let the warm sands of ancient Egypt drift softly from your thoughts. The sunlit temples, the steady pulse of the Nile, and the timeless rhythm of desert life can now settle gently in the background, fading like distant footsteps on stone. As those warm landscapes recede, imagine the air around you growing cooler, then calmer, and finally crisp. The golden tones of riverbanks shift gradually into muted whites and deep blues. The familiar warmth gives way to a serene, enveloping, cold, not harsh, just quiet. The earth beneath you becomes firmer, the horizon wider, the sound of water replaced by the faint whisper of snow. Allow the ancient world of Egypt to rest behind you like a completed chapter, while a new landscape rises around you, one shaped not by sand and sun, but by ice, silence, and the slow-moving breath of northern winds. With that gentle shift, we step softly into another ancient world, a world where the people moved with patience across frozen seas, watched the sky for shimmering signs, and carried their stories beneath the long arc of the polar night. And now, in this calm transformation from heat to cold, from river to ice, we begin our quiet journey into Inuit history. Take a slow, steady breath and allow yourself to settle into a comfortable position wherever you may be listening. Tonight we'll be traveling far, far north, to a place where the air is crisp enough to almost hum with cold, where winter nights stretch long across the horizon, and where quiet snowfields reflect a pale, shimmering glow. This is a journey into the world of the early Arctic, a world shaped by ice, silence, patience, and extraordinary human endurance. A place where every breath you take hangs briefly in the air, and every movement is measured, thoughtful, guided by knowledge passed through countless generations. The Inuit hunter-gatherer communities who lived in this environment did not merely survive here. They built families, crafted tools of elegance and precision, watched the sky for signs and spirits, and formed societies as intricate as the ice crystals that gathered on their clothing. Tonight's story is calm, quiet, and gentle. It lingers on the small details, the crunch of snow beneath boots made from seal hide, the muted crackle of a blubber lamp inside a snow house, the steady rhythm of breath against the wind. It is history told slowly, as if carried on the cold Arctic air itself. Our journey will unfold in 4 segments, beginning with the daily routine of a seal hunter, a role essential to survival, yet one that demanded immense patience and physical endurance. From there, we will drift into the mysterious disappearance of the Sadlermute people, a group whose final chapter remains partly shrouded in silence and unanswered questions. Then, the sky will open above us as we explore Inuit lore surrounding the northern lights, the shimmering bands of color that danced across winter nights and shaped stories about life, spirits, and movement. And finally, we'll settle into the rhythms of a Thule-era community, where craftsmanship, cooperation, and shared knowledge formed the backbone of Arctic society. Now, Let your shoulders release any tension they might be holding, and feel your breath find its own steady pattern. You don't have to focus too intently, just let the images drift in and out as we begin our quiet journey northward. Imagine yourself waking once more to the faint shifting of the wind against your shelter. The snow walls remain firm, but their subtle creaks remind you that everything around you is alive in its own slow, quiet way. The day begins not with urgency, but with decision, one formed from habit, from weather, from what the ice allows. Out here, in this place where the horizon has no edge, nothing moves quickly. Not you, not your tools, not your thoughts. Everything settles into a rhythm shaped by the cold. You sit up slowly, feeling the weight of clothing stiff from frost. Each layer is a deliberate choice. Caribou hides nearest the skin because its hollow hairs trap warmth. Perhaps another layer of fur outside that. And then the outer coverings scraped clean of grease, so they form a kind of natural armor against drifting snow. As you dress, you sense how heavy the garments are, how they limit your movement. They are comforting, certainly, but never quite comfortable. Even warmth itself feels different here. It is not the soft heat of a fire or sunlit room, but more like the absence of danger. The absence of cold cutting through to your bones. Your breath forms a low cloud as you step outside. The first sensation is always the same air that feels thin and sharp, like something that must be negotiated with rather than simply inhaled. The snow beneath your boots doesn't give like soil does. It crunches, compresses, and sometimes shifts in ways that keep you alert. Over time, you learn these sounds as if they were a language. A deeper crunch means the crust is thick. A brittle crack means yesterday's melt has frozen. A muffled softness means drift snow, light and full of air, will cling to your boots and slow your journey. The landscape stretches out in a calm, endless sheet of muted whites and soft blues. You might think there is nothing to see. But you begin to realize that the Inuit hunter, the person whose life you re-stepping into, sees layers where you see blankness. Shadows indicate wind direction. Slight rises in the surface hint at pressure ridges formed long ago. A cluster of darker speckles may reveal an opening in the ice, a lead of open water, or simply the edges of snow hardened by the breeze. Everything is a clue. Everything is information. The land is a quiet teacher. Today is a hunting day, but that doesn't necessarily mean you will return with meat. It means you will participate in a practice as old as anyone can remember. The patient, nearly meditative pursuit of seal. You gather your tools against king each one, because tools are as important as breath. Your harpoon, carefully bound with sinew. The bone or ivory tip, polished smooth so it enters the water easily. The line, coiled so it will not snag when you deliver the strike. Beside these rests, your snow knife, used to cut blocks if an emergency shelter is needed, and your small skin pouch holding tinder, flint, or whatever the season demands. As you walk, you feel the slight shifting of muscles that have spent a lifetime learning economy. No energy is wasted here. Every motion is reserved, purposeful. Your boots, perhaps sealskin with fur turned inward, grip the snow without creating unnecessary noise. In the distance, you might see the faint silhouettes of others doing the same, fanning out across the whiteness, like small, dark seeds scattered by a slow gesture of the wind. Eventually, you reach your chosen seal hole. These breathing holes are lifelines for the animals, and therefore lifelines for you. They are small, dark openings beneath crusts of snow, often invisible to untrained eyes. To find one requires knowledge passed down through generations, reading airflow on snow, listening for subtle hollows beneath your feet, understanding migration routes the way others might understand city streets. You kneel, you listen. This is where the day slows even further. Seal hunting is not the active chase some might imagine. Instead, it is a relationship built on patience. You become still so still that your breath becomes almost the only movement you allow yourself. The air around you feels quiet in a way that permeates your bones. Occasionally, the low hum of distant wind curls past, but mostly there is silence. Minutes pass, then more minutes, then stretches of time too long to easily measure. Sitting still in this cold is its own hardship. The cold doesn't attack suddenly. It simply makes its presence known in stages. First, your fingers feel thick. Then your toes begin to lose definition. Your face tingles where the wind touches it. Then feels numb, then feels nothing at all. Hunters learn to shift their weight just enough to keep circulation steady, but not enough to make noise. You may wonder whether it's worth it sitting here in this suspended state. But for the Inuit hunter, this is not wasted time. It is the quiet center of life, a practice that shapes the rhythm of existence. The seal will come only when it chooses, surfacing briefly for breath, and you must be ready in that exact moment. Hunting here is less about speed or force, and more about harmony with cycles older than any story. As you wait, you notice the play of snow crystals drifting across the surface, tiny sparks catching sunlight in silent movement. If you close your eyes, you feel the faint shifting of ice beneath you, the way larger flows drift slowly on currents far below. Sometimes you imagine, or perhaps you truly sense, the presence of animals in the water, fish moving in loose schools, seals gliding in shadowed tunnels, the occasional large shape passing through like a ghost of the deep. Your ears grow more attuned. You notice how the snow dampens sound, how the slightest scrape of fur or whisper of cloth becomes amplified to your own attention, how your heartbeat sounds louder than it should. In this stillness, you begin to understand that the Inuit hunter's greatest challenge is not the physical cold, but the requirement to live with long stretches of silent, solitary waiting. When at last the seal surfaces, if it does, I will not describe the strike in vivid or unsettling detail. It is swift, practiced, and respectful. The hunter's goal is sustenance, not spectacle. What matters more for our quiet journey is what happens afterward. A successful hunt means warmth, food, oil for lamps, skins for clothing, and bones for tools. It means a little more comfort, a little more safety stored away in a world where nothing is guaranteed. But the day is not finished. You still need to begin the slow journey home, following landmarks that are subtle to those unfamiliar with the land. The light may change gradually as clouds drift across the sky, turning the snow from bright white to muted gray. The horizon blurs, the air feels denser, each breath still leaves a trail, but now those trails merge with the rising mist of late afternoon. When you finally reach your shelter, whether it is a temporary igloo or a more permanent sword and stone dwelling, the warmth inside feels like a sigh. It is not hot, just warmer than outside. But compared to the sharp cold of the day, that slight rise in temperature feels like luxury. You remove layer after layer of clothing, each one stiff and faintly frosted. The interior of the shelter holds the scent of snow and hides and faint lamp smoke, all blending into something familiar, almost comforting. These activities require attention, but not intensity. offering a calming sort of purpose, a way for hands to move while the mind drifts. Around you, the air inside the shelter thickens slightly with humidity from breathing and melting frost. Sounds become rounder, gentler. Even the wind outside seems more distant. Finally, as night settles over the Arctic landscape, you lie down on your bedding of skins and furs. The world outside remains cold, vast, and unchanging. But inside, there is a sense of temporary refuge, a small island of warmth in an immense sea of ice. Take a slow breath, settling once more into the quiet rhythm of the Arctic landscape. The wind outside your thoughts softens, and the snow-covered world stretches out in your imagination like a vast white plain. For this segment, we shift from the intimate daily life of the Inuit seal hunter to the gentle unfolding of a deeper mystery, one that belongs to a people who lived in the far reaches of the Arctic and whose final chapter remains wrapped in calm uncertainty. The Sadlermeet lived on the Belcher Islands in Hudson Bay, a remote place even by Arctic standards. Imagine the cluster of islands, low, grey stone shaped by endless weathering. Small ridges rising like the backs of sleeping animals. Patches of lichens and moss clinging stubbornly to the ground. Around them, the water is cold, often misted, shifting from deep blues to softened greys, depending on the season. For most people in the world, the Belcher Islands would have been a place unimaginably isolated, quiet, defined by the rhythms of ice, tides, and migrating animals. The Sadlermeet were among the last groups thought to preserve lifeways connected to the earlier Dorset culture and ancient Arctic people who predated the Thule Inuit. Whether the Sadlermeet were direct descendants or simply carriers of certain traditions is still uncertain. But, for centuries, they lived in a peaceful isolation, shaped by a seasonal cycle of hunting, fishing, and community. Imagine them in their small settlements, clusters of semi-subterranean houses built low to the ground. Their roofs supported by bones or driftwood and covered in layers of sod. Inside, lamps burned steadily, fueled by the rich oil of the seal. The flickering light would have cast warm, comforting shadows on the stone walls, illuminating tools and stored supplies. Outside, the air would have been filled with the quiet sounds of distant waves against rock, the occasional call of seabirds drifting overhead, and perhaps the soft voices of people working side by side. Their world was calm, steady, and deeply connected to the land. Now, imagine a moment in time. Late summer day in 1902. A small group of Sadlermeet paddles out in Umiaks, traveling toward a particular hunting site, or simply following the seasonal pattern they have always known. They are strong, capable hunters, using techniques refined over generations. Their tools, harpoons, knives, nets carry the legacy of their ancestors. But, in the same period, outside visitors begin arriving in the region more frequently. Whalers, traders, and explorers. They bring items the Sadlermeet would find: curious metal tools, wooden implements, new fabrics, even small decorative objects. But these visitors also bring something else, something far more dangerous and invisible: illness. The story, as it is known, unfolds carefully and quietly, without dramatic flourish. According to accounts, in 1902 and 1903, a sudden sickness swept through the Sadlermeet. It moved with a terrible efficiency, but even then, it remained shrouded in silence. Some say the illness began after contact with a whaler whose crew may have introduced a respiratory disease, perhaps influenza, perhaps typhus. The exact origin is uncertain, as are the details of its spread. What is known is that within a season, the Sadlermeet were gone. But before reaching the end, imagine their way of life more fully. so that the loss can be understood not as a dramatic tragedy, but as a gentle fading of a culture uniquely adapted to its world. The Sadlermites spent their summers gathering bird eggs, fishing in calm waters, and drying fish for the colder months. They traveled along the rocky shores in boats made of animal skins stretched over wooden frames. Their knowledge of local currents and winds was profound, developed through countless careful observations shared between generations. Their winters were spent in warm communal dwellings, where stories passed quietly through long hours of darkness. These stories may have included legends of ancient beings, explanations for the patterns of the stars, or accounts of heroic hunts. Their tools bore the hallmark of earlier Arctic technologies: broad, flat blades made of bone, ground slate or horn, and harpoon heads shaped with precision. While the Thule Inuit used bows and arrows, the Sadlermiut rarely did. They continued to rely heavily on older methods, such as spears, slings, and traditional forms of trapping. In this sense, they existed as a living echo of Arctic prehistory, a bridge to an earlier world. Their language, as heard by visitors, was reportedly distinct. Some words resembled Inuit dialects, while others seemed unfamiliar, suggesting layers of cultural memory preserved within a small and insular community. Archaeologists later noted the simplicity and elegance of Sadlermite structures. Their houses were small, rounded depressions in the earth, lined with stone. Above these shelters, sod and skins provided insulation against winter winds. During the cold months, smoke from seal oil lamps would rise slowly and gently through small vents, carrying the faint scent of burning fat mingled with the earthy smell of the house walls. You can imagine a day in their lives just as calmly as you imagined the life of the seal hunter in segment 1. The slow gathering of driftwood along the shore, the rhythmic chopping of ice to draw water, the low hum of conversation as people patched clothing or prepared food, children playing quietly near the settlement's edge, learning the small skills that would guide them in adulthood. And then, imagine that these sounds gradually fall away over the course of a single winter. When the illness arrived, the Sadlermiut would not have understood its nature. They may have spoken of a sudden weakness, a fever, a cough that settled in the lungs and made breathing difficult. But they had no immunity, no long history of exposure to the diseases that swept across other parts of the world. Their isolation, once a shield, now left them vulnerable in a way they could not have anticipated. According to the accounts of those who visited the islands shortly afterward, the settlements were quiet. Tools lay where they had been placed. Kayaks rested on the shore. Food stores remained sealed. The people were simply gone. It is important to speak gently here, because imagining the final days of a community requires care. There is no need to envision suffering in detail. Instead, picture the fading of voices, the disappearance of footsteps on snow, the stillness settling over homes once warmed by life. Picture the shoreline as it must have looked, unchanged, impartial, stretching endlessly along the water as it had for centuries. The land, steady and ancient, absorbed their absence without disturbance. In the decades since, archaeologists and anthropologists have studied the Sadlermiut, trying to understand who they were and what their disappearance means. Excavations revealed traces of their daily life: cooking areas, stone tools, bone fragments, broken pots, and the remains of old habitations. These echoes help researchers piece together the quiet story of a people who lived at the intersection of cultures, part Dorset, part Thule, entirely unique. But even with careful study, questions remain. Were the Sadlermiut the last living descendants of the Dorset culture? Or were they simply a distinct Inuit group who preserved older traditions? What was their relationship to neighboring peoples? What legends did they tell about their origins? How did they interpret the landscape that sustained them? These mysteries linger like soft shadows, not meant to be solved with complete certainty, but to be contemplated slowly, the way one watches drifting snow settle on a quiet shore. As you reflect on the fading story of the Sadlermite, notice how their memory persists not through dramatic tales, but through small, resilient details. The shape of a tool, the curve of a dwelling, the pattern of their hunting routes. These quiet remnants speak in the same calm tones as the Arctic itself, offering a sense of continuity between the living world and the past. Their disappearance becomes, in this context, not only an end, but a reminder of how delicate human presence can be in a place shaped by such immense natural forces. The Arctic remembers in its own way, through stone, through ice, through whispered stories passed between generations. And now, gently, we prepare to move from the earthly realm of people and settlements to something that lies above them, something that has inspired Inuit cultures for centuries. Lights that dance across the winter sky, lights that whisper stories of spirits, hunters, and the pathways between worlds. Let your mind drift upward once more into the vast, unhurried space of the Arctic sky. We continue where we left off, allowing the aurora to grow richer, broader, and more layered as we explore its meanings in deeper, gentler detail. As you stand on the snow-covered ground, imagining the northern lights above, the entire sky feels like a dome stretching endlessly in all directions. The stars glimmer with a steady brilliance, undisturbed by smoke, pollution, or distant cities. To the Inuit, the sky was not empty. It was a landscape of its own, an expanse, where movement carried intention, where color carried meaning, and where spirits moved not as shadows, but as shimmering currents of light. The aurora was often interpreted as the footsteps, voices, or gestures of beings whose lives continued beyond the material world. In some traditions, the aurora represented the spirits of ancestors engaging in their own quiet activities, hunting, playing games, or watching over their descendants. When the lights moved quickly, swirling in long spirals, some believed the spirits were running or dancing. When the lights drifted gently like a slow tide, people said the spirits were walking peacefully, untroubled. Imagine a group of Inuit families gathered outside on a still night, wrapped in thick caribou clothing, their breath creating faint clouds that hover close to their faces. Above them, the sky glows with shifting arcs of light. No one rushes, no one speaks loudly. They simply watch, their expressions soft and intent. In many Inuit communities, the aurora were believed to be spirits playing with a ball or objects, sometimes a glowing skull of a walrus or beluga whale. This imagery might sound unsettling in modern terms, but in context it reflected a world where life and death were closely intertwined and respected. The idea was playful, not frightening. To see the spirals dance was almost like watching a celestial game, carried out far overhead. Imagine now the soundscape of such a moment. The wind, if present at all, is a low whisper moving past your hood. A dog may shift in the snow behind you, its fur brushing softly against the ground. People breathe slowly, their inhalations and exhalations forming a gentle rhythm. And above all of this, the silence of the lights themselves. One of the enduring questions surrounding the aurora is whether they truly produce sound. Many Inuit have reported hearing faint crackles or soft, whispering noises when the lights become particularly bright or active. These sounds, when described, often resemble the release of static electricity, or the delicate rustling of distant branches, sounds too gentle to disturb, but curious enough to notice. Scientists debate whether this phenomenon is acoustic or purely perceptual. But to those who heard the aurora, the sound was real and meaningful. Imagine how extraordinary it would feel to stand in a silent Arctic night and hear even the faintest murmur from the sky. Such an experience would naturally inspire stories. Some Inuit believed that whistling at the aurora could draw it closer. This wasn't simply a superstition. It was part of a broader understanding of respect and behavior during the presence of powerful natural forces. Whistling was discouraged, not because the lights were malevolent, but because their closeness was considered unsafe. You can imagine a parent gently reminding a child to lower their voice or stop whistling if the lights began to brighten. The atmosphere carried a sense of cautious reverence. For other groups, the aurora symbolized guidance lights carried by spirits to help the newly departed find their way into the afterlife. In this understanding, the lights were comforting, not fearful. They were lanterns in the sky, softly illuminating the path between worlds. Picture someone sitting alone, just outside their home late at night, watching the aurora drift and ripple, while thinking of a loved one who passed recently. The lights above might feel like a message, not in the literal sense, but in the emotional, contemplative sense. A calm reassurance that connections persist, even across the boundaries of life and death. In some regions of the far north, the aurora took on more playful interpretations. Some stories describe the lights as spirits playing with the souls of animals. If the lights moved rapidly, flickering with intense energy, some believed they were chasing those spirits through the sky. Again, this wasn't meant to frighten. It was simply a way of understanding movement, assigning narrative to forces that felt alive. Imagine yourself lying back on a fur bedding outside a quiet village, staring up at the swirling green ribbons, imagining unseen hunters moving across the night in silent pursuit. The sky becomes animated, almost theatrical in the gentlest possible way. There is no loudness, no urgency, just slow, meaningful movement. Inuit sky lore was not separate from daily life. It was integrated into ritual, hunting practices, and even social interactions. Some groups believed that if the aurora appeared particularly bright early in winter, it signaled a season of good hunting. Others saw the lights as an omen of change shifts in weather patterns, migrations, or internal community events. Archaeologists studying ancient Inuit sites sometimes find artifacts oriented toward particular celestial directions, placed carefully near hearths or doorways. While it's not always possible to draw firm conclusions, some researchers theorize that the alignment of dwellings and ceremonial spaces might reflect attention to the sky's rhythms. You can imagine an ancient settlement long before European contact, with families sitting in a ring of houses, all oriented to catch both the warmth of the sun and the view of the aurora during the long winter nights. The placement of each home would have been practical, yes, but also mindful of forces that shaped understanding of the world. In many oral traditions, the aurora was a space where the boundary between the living and the spirit world softened, not dissolved entirely, but loosened like the slow opening of a curtain. Watching the lights, people might feel closer to intangible forces, sensing that the lights were not just atmospheric displays, but living patterns. This idea resonates across cultures that live close to the land and sky. Patterns become stories. Stories become knowledge. Knowledge becomes comfort. And in the Arctic, where winter nights stretch endlessly across months, comfort in the form of light carries deep emotional weight. Imagine now a long winter night in a sod house or snow house. The interior is dim, lit only by a seal oil lamp that casts a soft orange glow across the walls. Even today, with all our scientific explanations, standing beneath the aurora evokes a sense of awe and tranquility. You feel small, but not insignificant. You feel connected to the sky, the frost, the earth beneath your feet, and the people who once looked upon these same lights with stories that made the world feel intimate and alive. As the aurora fades from your imagination, sinking slowly toward the horizon, we begin a gentle descent back toward the world of people, toward the structures they built, the tools they crafted, and the social rhythms that shaped their daily lives. As the glow of the aurora fades gently from your imagination, let yourself drift downward slowly, calmly toward the ground once more. From the vast expanse of the Arctic night sky, we settle into the soft edges of daily life inside a Tuliera village, where warmth comes not only from fire and fur, but from cooperation, routine, and shared purpose. Imagine a cluster of snow houses or semi-subterranean sod dwellings, arranged thoughtfully along a frozen coastline. They stand close to one another, their shapes rounded and smooth, almost like weathered stones half buried in snow. Smoke from oil lamps seeps quietly from small openings, carried away in thin, wandering trails by the drifting wind. Around them, the world is still. This is a Thule community, perhaps 700 or 800 years ago. You can picture it with unhurried clarity, families moving in slow, practiced rhythms, hunters preparing equipment with calm concentration, dogs resting on packed snow, children rolling bone fragments between their hands like toys. A sense of quiet order permeates everything, shaped by a life where cooperation is not a virtue but a necessity. Inside one of these homes, step into the soothing dimness. The entrance tunnel is narrow and low, meant to trap cold air before it reaches the interior. As you crawl gently through it in your imagination, the space begins to warm. The dome-shaped room beyond is softly illuminated by a single Kulika stone lamp filled with seal oil, its wick glowing with a steady, amber flame. The light flickers across the interior walls, revealing layers of carefully arranged turf, driftwood, and cannabis stones. The floor is raised slightly, insulated from the frozen earth beneath it. A family sits in a loose circle around the lamp, their faces relaxed, their voices hushed. The atmosphere is neither hurried nor idle, it is simply balanced. Cooperation begins at the household level. Each person, regardless of age, has tasks suited to their strength and skill. Children scrape hides or soften sinew cords. Adolescents learn to carve, sew, or shape tools under gentle supervision. Adults maintain the full cycle of work, repairing sled runners, checking bowstrings, thinning the lamp wick, or trimming fur parkas so they shed snow efficiently. Everyone contributes, everyone learns, everyone belongs. In many ways, the Tuliera Inuit were defined by their craftsmanship. Their environment demanded it. Tools were not disposable conveniences, but lifelong companions, objects that required attention, tuning, and sometimes ritual respect. The quality of a harpoon line or a sled's crosspiece could determine whether a hunt succeeded or failed. Precision was not for pride, but for survival. Imagine now the slow, deliberate work of making a kayak. A man sits cross-legged on a fur mat inside his dwelling, illuminated by the soft glow of the oil lamp. In front of him lies the delicate frame of the vessel, built from driftwood ribs lashed together with sinew. There is no metal nail, no glue, no modern resinoni bone would hide an immense care. He tests each connection with the quiet pressure of his fingertips. He listens, not for sound, but for feel, how the frame flexes beneath gentle weight, how the curvature aligns with his mental image of how it should ride through waves and broken ice. Meanwhile, nearby, a woman prepares the sealskin covering. The skin has been scraped, stretched, washed, and dried with patient precision. She inspects the seams laid out along the ground, running her hand across them to check for evenness. Any small imperfection might allow water to seep in during a long paddle across frigid currents. So she adjusts, reinforces, smooths. Together, their work forms a quiet, duet-and-spoken coordination that reflects years of partnership, shared experience, and mutual reliance. This theme interdependence echoes throughout every corner of Thule society. Consider the communal hunt, perhaps the most significant expression of cooperation. A whale hunt, for example, required meticulous timing and synchronized skill. It involved multiple kayaks, watchers on shore, harpooners, float carriers, and rope handlers. No single person, no matter how strong or experienced, could take on such a task alone. Picture the preparation. Families gathering outside as the weather begins to settle. Men adjust the bindings on their sleds. Women tie fresh lines of braided sinew to floats made of inflated sealskins. A specialist inspects the long, barbed harpoon, checking the polished bone tip for flaws. The atmosphere is not tense. It is focused, quiet, measured. Every individual knows their role, and every role blends into the whole. The community operates like a living organism, each part essential, each some greater than its pieces. Social status in Thule communities was shaped less by wealth and more by contribution. A skilled hunter might earn respect, but so too would a master seamstress whose garments saved lives in bleak winter storms. A toolmaker with exceptional precision might be quietly revered. Even elders with fading physical strength held great significance, custodians of memory, tradition, and the calm kind of wisdom that comes only from watching many winters pass. Imagine an elder sitting by the lamp in a warm house, shaping a small ivory charm or retelling a story about a long-ago hunt. Their voice is steady, their hands slow and sure. Children gather near, listening to the rhythm of words rather than the content alone. Through such stories, young people absorb lessons, not in commands, but in images. How to read currents under broken ice, how to interpret the behavior of seals or whales, how to navigate by stars in a landscape where landmarks shift with snow and time. Status was dynamic, not rigid. Leadership was situational, and authority grew through trust and competence, not dominance. You can also imagine the quiet rituals of daily hospitality. When visitors arrived at a dwelling, perhaps relatives from a neighboring group or travelers seeking shelter, there was a pattern of welcome that expressed respect and warmth. Guests were offered a space near the lamp, a share of fresh or frozen meat, and time to warm themselves. Stories flowed in low voices, the kind that allow listeners to drift in and out without losing the thread. Such gatherings helped maintain social bonds across long distances. Despite the isolation of the Arctic landscape, Thule communities were interconnected by kinship, alliances, and seasonal encounters. Sharing food, information, and small crafted items created a sense of unity that extended far across the frozen coastlines. Craftsmanship also had a social dimension. Tools were sometimes embellished with subtle decorations, small incised lines on a harpoon shaft, carved faces on amulets, patterns etched into bone handles. These were not ornamental in the modern sense. They were reminders of identity, family, or the spirit world. A tool was both functional and symbolic. It carried stories. Imagine a hunter holding a beautifully polished toggle harpoon head made of walrus ivory. On its surface, faint lines trace a stylized creature, perhaps a seal or a bear. The carving is simple, but deeply intentional. As the hunter runs a finger across it, he feels both the artistry and the meaning. Protection, respect, acknowledgement of the animal whose life will sustain his family. In this quiet blend of practicality and spirituality, the material world becomes layered with importance, a tapestry of subtle significance. In the heart of winter, when snow walls pressed gently against the outside of the house and the world remained wrapped in near-constant darkness, families grew especially close. People spent long hours indoors repairing gear, sewing clothing, polishing tools, and sharing quiet stories to pass the time. The rhythm of daily work created a gentle lull, not unlike the slow breathing of someone settling into sleep. These long nights encouraged reflection. Conversations moved softly from memories to hopes for the coming spring. Children fell asleep to the sound of sewing needles tapping softly against bone thimbles. Adults spoke in low murmurs. The lamp flickered and hummed with the faint sound of burning oil. This interior world, warm, enclosed, communal, contrasted beautifully with the vast openness outside. The people of the Thule era lived in harmony with both spaces, the intimate and the immense. Inside the home, cooperation and craft sustained life. Outside, the hunt and the land offered opportunity and challenge. As we let the final images of this community fade softly into the quiet of your mind, we prepare to leave the long arc of the Arctic past. In our next moment, we will reflect on the entire journey, from the icy breath of daily survival to the mystery of lost peoples, to the glowing spirits in the sky and the gentle order of community life. As our journey through the far northern world slowly draws to a close, let yourself drift once more into the quiet expanse of the Arctic night. Allow everything we've explored to settle into the soft stillness of your Mindenhurried. Peaceful and without need for resolution. We began with the stark and humbling reality of daily life as an Inuit hunter, moving through cold so deep it shaped every breath, and tasks so precise they demanded patience beyond what most people today could imagine. You walked through snow that swallowed sound, followed the long rhythms of migration, and felt the quiet endurance that defined survival in this frozen world. Then you stepped gently into the story of the Sadlermight, a people whose disappearance remains wrapped in mystery. Their final days unfolded not in spectacle, but in a calm, fading echo, one that archaeologists and oral histories continue to trace with respectful curiosity. Even in their loss, we found reflections of resilience, independence, and the fragile balance communities maintained in the Arctic's vast, beautiful silence. From there, we lifted our gaze to the sky, where the northern lights moved like slow, shimmering spirits. We lingered beneath their glow, feeling the same wonder that shaped Inuit sky lore for centuries. Their soft, shifting colors offered comfort through long nights, becoming companions quiet, luminous, and full of meaning. Finally, we settled into the warmth of a Thule-era home, surrounded by the calm murmur of family and the steady glow of an oil lamp. We watched as communities built their world with cooperation, skill, and mutual trust. We observed the rhythm of shared work, the subtle ways status and respect were expressed, and the deep interdependence that carried people through each season. Across all these scenes, harsh winters, vanished peoples, shimmering skies, and communal homes, one thread runs gently through everything. The quiet endurance of human life in a place shaped by cold, silence, and vastness. As you lie here now, perhaps with your eyes growing heavier, Take a moment to appreciate how distant that world is from your own life, and yet how familiar it can feel when described slowly, softly. The people of the far north lived with intention, with patience, and with a deep awareness of their days were shaped by tasks repeated year after year, their nights by stories carried gently across generations. There is something deeply calming in imagining their world, something grounding, something steady. And now, as this journey settles into a soft whisper, you can allow yourself to drift, just as the aurora drifts across a winter sky, slow, effortless, and without need for direction. Feel the quiet around you. Feel the calm settling through your thoughts. Feel the soft rhythm of your own breath. The Arctic night we've explored does not end abruptly, fades into a gentle darkness, much like the kind you can relax into now. The snow-covered houses, the distant glow of the sky, the slow murmur of voices inside a warm dwelling, they all recede gradually, becoming softer and softer until they are only a calm background hum. Let them drift. Let yourself drift with them. There is nothing more you need to do. Nothing you must remember. Nothing to hold on to. Just rest. And as you rest, you can imagine that the northern lights continue their slow, luminous dance, somewhere far away, moving gently, endlessly, in a sky older than memory. Sleep well, and good night.